What up, lovely peeps? Today we are building a new PC, and this one is going to be built for Josh. He threw me a budget, and this is what we collected. So let's get started. First off is the Intel Core i5 processor. This is the 4670K. Next is the Sabertooth motherboard Z970 Mark II from ASUS. Awesome possum. And next we got Samsung solid state drives, the 850 EVOs. And then our power supply from Corsair. This is the RM650. Pretty reliable power supply. I worked with a few of these in the past. Power efficiency is pretty good. It's not that bad. Stays pretty quiet, and you don't have to worry about it being loud. Next, we're going to move on to the GeForce GTX 960. This is the superclock version from AVGA, and this is the 2GB version. So it's not the 4GB. There's a couple of versions out for this one, but I'm not going to go into detail for that. But this guy does suffice for video editing and gaming here and there. Next is our Corsair Vengeance Pro series. This is computer memory, aka RAM, and this is 16 gigabytes of 2400 megahertz. Good for video editing. And here we go. I got two spare fans to throw in this case here. Moving on to the case, yes, this is another Phantom 410. You saw this one for Brandon's setup. Most cases do come with their USB cables and power switches and fans here and there. This one comes with 3 fans and a box for all the bolts. Moving on to the motherboard. So this guy comes with a couple SATA cables for your hard drive, so need that for later. And then a back case for your motherboard. And then all-in-one plugins for your power switches and USBs. And an SLI cable if you ever plan to dual your video cards. And then a decal. Yeah, a decal that you probably won't use at all. And then a manual booklet just in case you need help. First, it's very important to build your computer outside of the case. Reason being is because if you run into any faulty products, you don't want to go into the hassle of taking everything outside of the case again, and that's just a pain in the ass. Moving on to the SATA cables. So each motherboard is labeled with the SATA numbers, so please plug it into the correct order. You boot from SATA 1, and the list goes on from there. Okay, so that goes 1 and 2. Awesome. Next is your RAM, so make sure your pins go in the right sockets. And then what you gotta do first is open up these little guys here, little locks, and then take your RAM, put it into the right sockets. So this one goes to the little first socket here, lock it in, kind of push it down a little bit until it clicks. Don't worry, it will not break, okay? It's a little bit of force right down until it clicks and lock it in. Moving on to the processor, so you want to remove this little protector case for it and keep it for later, and then lift this pin back, or the enclosure for the processor. Then you want to slip in the CPU, aka processor, into its socket. Make sure it's in there nicely. Okay, and then close it back down the enclosure, and then lock it. It's gonna seem like a lot of force, but don't worry about it. It will be okay. Then you want to snap on to the default CPU fan. This is just for default, so you don't have to worry about attaching the other stuff yet. Just to make sure things are working. Attach it to the CPU power supply right above. Next is the power supply, so make sure it is off when you plug the stuff in. We're going to move to the motherboard power cable, and we're going to plug it into the power supply. And it's the biggest looking one. And it goes right above right there. Slap it in there. It's good to go. Next, moving on to the CPU power supply, and this is the 8-pin. It goes right into the power cord socket right there. And then the CPU goes into the CPU slot on the power. Yeah, it's right there. Just stick it in. See, right there. It's 2 to 6 PCI CPU. Now make sure your bootable drive is plugged into the SATA cable, number 1. And then you're gonna look for your SATA power supply. It's the Tetris L-shaped looking attachment here, and with the 6-pin power supply cable. And plug in the 6-pin into the 6-pin slot, and take the SATA power supply and plug it into the hard drive. Awesome, that's all you gotta do from there. Next, you want to attach your video card, so remove all the plastics covering protectors for it, because you don't want that stuff to melt when you turn on this stuff. Just for safety precautions, guys. Alright, and then take off the rubber piece that's protecting your pins. Alright, now what you want to do is slap it in right there in the right sockets. Okay, just like that, as you can see. There you go. Now you can take off all the protective dust covers for the video card, right? And take off this guy right here. And then you're going to attach your monitor so you can do HDMI or all the other connectors, etc. Moving on to the all-in-one plug-in power supply switches. So this connects your reset buttons, power switches, LEDs, etc. And the words match the words, so plug in those words into the right words and you're good to go. Moving on to powering up your video card. So plug in your power cables into the right sockets and then take your split PCI cable for your video card. Looks like this one. And plug it into the right sockets. The pins have to match the pins. So this guy is an 8 socket, goes right in there. Make sure your USB 3 cables are connected and your hard drive, so you have all functioning ports. Flip it on and watch it run. Live, baby, live, and it lives. Cool. Okay, everything is working. We're not getting any error codes. And voila, we're gonna boot from the USB and install Windows. Cool, Josh. You're gonna have fun with this guy. First, we're gonna put the power supply into the case and put the power cables to the back, and make sure you have 4 screws attached for this power supply. As you can see, the power cables run through the back, and I have my USB 3 cable here to attach to my motherboard. And I'm going to run those power cables through here later once the motherboard is attached to the case. Next, I'm going to put the back cover of the motherboard into its right socket here, which was located in the back of the case, and it will cover all the ports from getting all dirty and stuff like that. Moving on to attachments of the motherboard to the case, what I'm going to do is get these little hex screws here and attach to the hex adapter, so I can screw on these little hex screws to the case much easier. And each motherboard will come with the right sockets, as you can see here, and make sure the sockets are in the right place, because each motherboard are different sizes. And you match up all the holes, and there you go. All the hex screws are attached, and I also have my CPU power cable running through the back here, which I'll be connecting it to the motherboard. And the rest of the motherboard, power supplies, and the PCI cables. Now we're going to put the case on its side and screw in the motherboard. So make sure all these sockets have its screws right into the sockets. And as you can see, we have about 9 sockets here. And make sure everything is screwed in correctly. It's awesome possum. And then now we're going to move on to the real CPU cooler, which this is the H105, like I always use on all the other computers I have. And we're going to attach this guy right here to the CPU. To attach the CPU cooler, you're going to have to add this mount in the back of the processor. The cooler does come with different types of screws, so please make sure you read the manual and figure out what screws you need to use for your processor. And now all 4 screws are into the right sockets. Now you're going to add thermal cement to the CPU cooler and attach the CPU cooler to the processor. And then take the CPU power cable and attach it to the CPU power supply port on the motherboard right above like that. Then you take the motherboard power supply and attach it to the ports like I showed earlier in the beginning of this video, and plug it right into its right socket. It might be a little sturdy, but there you go. Now we're going to take the 6+2 PCI cable and attach it to the video card. And then we take this little socket here out and attach the fan to its extra compartment here to cool down the inside of your computer, just like that. There you go. You can also adjust it, but since the video card's in the way, you're just gonna kind of have to keep it flat. We are finally coming to the end, and now we are going to attach the 2 hard drives into its compartments from the back here. So make sure the SATA cable 1 is attached to your bootable hard drive, and then the other one to your SATA 2, and power them up. Voila! Now we got a working computer, except that fan right there. The CPU power cable is in the way, so I'll have to adjust that to one. And there you go, Josh. Happy playing video games, a working fully computer, and have fun editing and doing whatever else you do, like playing LOL. Lame.